So I guess let me ask you, like, I mean, it's been a radical shift, from where when you started in radio to this age now, where I mean, really, podcasting's kind of taken over. What do you think was, I don't know, kind of special about you being able to watch that transition over time?
Oh, that's a good question. Because at first, when I started hearing about podcasting, I was snobby about it. I'm like, oh, that's amateur hour. I'm a broadcaster. That's for amateurs. Um, but it didn't take me long to discover the flexibility and freedom that podcast gives you. And I'm a production guy. I love to just be in a work with sounds and
Yeah,
edit sounds and make new sounds and things like that. I'm a studio rat ever since I was a kid, ever since I was 18. I was, just always in the studio. And the podcasting really gave me an opportunity to do whatever I wanted with the audio medium. And then to find a way to connect it to Star Wars, it was really interesting how I came to that. In 2005, I did a production for CBS Radio to get on board the hype train with the Revenge of the Sith.
yeah.
I was supposed to do it for Attack of the Clones. So I traveled actually 3 years prior to this. I traveled to Indianapolis. Me and my brother Billy Mack drove out there, and we secured a bunch of interviews with Star Wars celebrities, thinking that we'd be able to use it on this radio show that I had been given a casual green light to produce. But in between the uh, the few weeks of me returning and getting ready to produce it, the program director who gave me that casual green light left the company, and he was replaced with a guy who did not like me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I didn't even approach him about this. Hey, I got this Star Wars thing that the other guy said I could do. I just didn't do it. Fast forward 3 years later, and episode 3 is going to come out. The same guy who left the company before, he came back in the same role. And I was like, well, thank God that other guy hated me. But so this guy's back. And I was like, oh, congrats. I'm so happy you're back. Can I do that Star Wars show you said I could do? He's like, what Star Wars show? And so I explained it to him. And he's like, yeah, go have fun. Do whatever you're going to do. So I went to Indianapolis again for the next Star Wars convention. And so I already had interviews that I had secured 3 years earlier. And then I got a bunch of fresh stuff at this new convention. And I put it all together into an hour-long show. And
Yeah.
so that was like essentially my very first Star Wars podcast, but it was on the radio. But I just love doing it so much. And I was sitting in the studio editing those interviews and making radio bumpers and IDs with Star Wars sound effects. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing it. That was the first thing. I couldn't believe I was actually doing it. And the second one was, I want to do more. I
Yeah.
want to do more of this. But you get your opportunity, the hour plays, it's done, it's over with. And I was just trying to figure out a way to keep riding that wave. And a few months went by. Um, Actually, a year went by. And they had announced that there was going to be another Star Wars celebration in LA in 2007. And I was like, oh, this is so exciting. I'm going to go and, what? I'm going to get interviews and then do what with them, right?
Yeah.
But I was still going to do it anyway, just because it was such a good thing for me to do that one year when I went and got the interviews and couldn't use them for anything. So I'm like, well, I'll just try again. Maybe I will get the opportunity if I just do it. And I kept seeing this thing about a podcast at theforce.net, and I didn't have time to listen to it because I always wanted to work on the radio shows I was working on. And when I would drive home, I would listen to our afternoon drive show, and I had an incentive to listen to that afternoon drive show because my wife was a co-host on that show. So I would always want to listen to that. she was going to have a knee surgery at the end of 2005, 2006, something like that. And so she was off the air for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I was gonna go see her at the hospital. I was gonna pick up my kids and then drive them back into the city to see her at the hospital. And I didn't have any way to listen to a podcast. I didn't even have an iPod. So I burned a CD of the podcast hosted by Jason Swank and Pete Nadel, and I listened to it. I remember that night I was listening to it in my car on a CD, and I was like, "These guys are pretty good. Okay, I see what they're doing here. Okay," and so I kept burning CDs and listening to this podcast, binging it while I was driving my kids back and forth into the city to see their mom who was in the hospital for a few days.
Mhm.
By the end of that week, it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. I'm like, I gotta help these guys out. I hear what they're trying to do, but they're not quite at that level. And I
Right.
can help them get to that level. And I thought it would be cool to do because I was really starting to enjoy their show and the chemistry between these two guys and everything. And I just wanted to make their show sound better. So it was a better listening experience for me as a listener. That's all I wanted to do was help them out.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to theforce.net and I dealt with their content manager and not the guys. And he sort of just said, okay, well, you can work with them. He sort of just pushed me off on them.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, this isn't going to go well. Yeah, these guys are going to be resistant because they've been podcasting for a few months and it was, they were starting to build some momentum and getting their feet on the ground and everything. And then all of a sudden I come in and I'm going to show them how to do it, big shot
Yeah.
radio guy,
Yeah.
right? But in all reality, I was a fan of theirs and I just wanted to contribute so I would know people at the convention in LA in a few months. I thought it would be cool just to walk up to a table and be like, "Hey, I'm Jimmy Mack. Nice to meet you." That's all I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
that would be neat. And there was a little bit of resistance from the guys as far as my helping them out. But that ice thawed pretty fast, and by the time we were hanging out in LA together a few months later, we realized that we were really hitting it off well, and that was the beginning of, you know, a really long and fruitful relationship where I was just kind of like in the background, doing what I do, playing with sounds, hanging out in the studio, and letting those guys do their thing and enjoying the show.
Yeah.
And then about 2 years later, Pete Nadel, he said he was going to leave the show, go start a family. And I tried to encourage Jason to keep doing the show by himself because I was a fan and I enjoyed the show. And he never asked me, but just one time we tried to talk Pete out of it. It didn't look like he was going to budge. And I was starting to contribute more and more to the show anyway
Mhm.
as far as doing a lot of celebrity interviews. I had my own Star Wars music show on the feed and everything. And so I think I just suggested to Jason, well, I can sit in for Pete once he leaves. And we decided we just wouldn't make any announcements about it or anything because Jason and Pete, that was a very popular thing. Pete was a very popular guy with the fan base and everything. And they were really making a strong connection. And so I thought it would be bad if we made some big announcement, Pete's replacement or anything like that.
Yeah.
We didn't say anything. Pete said goodbye. We gave him a big farewell. And then the show came back the next week and I was the co-host. And it was good that we didn't make that announcement because I think the force.net sort of they wanted to have more control over all of that and have more
Mhm.
say maybe, but they weren't being proactive at all as far as finding a replacement for Pete. And I just slotted myself in there. We just started doing shows and the listeners seemed to like it. And by the time the management at TFN started asking any questions, we had already established ourselves as the new podcast duo. So um, and then that went on for a few years. And then when Disney acquired the franchise and it looked like, there was going to be lots more new films, a whole new era of Star Wars was starting. I knew that the number of Star Wars podcasts would go from a handful to a truck full,
Oh yeah.
a
Oh yeah.
semi full, it went from like a dozen podcasts to all of a sudden overnight, like 500 to 1,000 podcasts as it is today. There's probably somewhere in that ballpark, 500 Star Wars podcasts out there you can choose from.
Easily.
And so I knew that was going to happen. And I really thought it would be a good opportunity for us to break loose from TFN and go totally independent. And it was just time for the little chick to fly out of the nest, and so we did, and it's been great. It's been Rebel Force Radio ever since then. This 14 years later, this September it'll be 14 years of nonstop Star Wars podcasting, from Jason Swank and myself. My actual anniversary is in December because I came into the party a little later after Wendy had the knee surgery and all that.
Yeah.
But that's how it all happened, and so we just keep trucking along, and it's sort of a weird period right now, because we don't have any films on the horizon, and we're really hyper focused on the Mandalorian right now, and I like it because it takes me back a little bit to those early years when we were doing the show for TFN. There was no Star Wars going on then either. It was after Revenge of the Sith and before the Clone Wars TV show came out.
Right.
Um, so they're just, we just have to not rely so much on breaking news of the week and all that, but just talk Star Wars and share our passions and our observations and talk about the stories that already exist. And so those were interesting times that I think really got us prepared to doing podcasts now, where there's more Star Wars news than there was back then by far, but um, it's just kind of a nice quiet little time right now, and I think it's a good time to be introspective as a Star Wars fan too, and really appreciate the Star Wars that exists, the Star Wars that is, as opposed to constantly debating over the Star Wars that isn't,
Yeah.
aka why did George Lucas make the prequels about a kid, or why is Ray so strong with the Force without being trained, things like that. That's minor stuff. Look at the big picture, I think, and that's what's good about this sort of period of downtime while the franchise is resetting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's I mean, I think you made the right move because I mean the greatest benefit of a podcast as opposed to working in a radio station, as I'm sure you will attest, is creative control, being able to
yeah,
have your own voice, being able to say what you want. I
hmm
mean, I feel like, if you would have stuck at like force.net, primarily if you had negative things to say, they may have had notes for you on that.
there were
But
times. I know. I mean, I can confirm that because during those years we were there for 6 years, we would occasionally get notes, and it was never pretty. It was never pretty, but you hear them out, and then you just do what you do. I mean, that's how we do it in radio.
yeah,
You hear them out, and then you just get on the air and do what you always do. But yeah, the freedom that podcasts give you, and just the fact that radio is so big, as far as a corporate run industry, it's very frustrating, and you really just feel like, very unimportant at the end of the day. You don't feel like you're working for the greater good of your career a lot of times. You're working for the
yeah,
greater good of the corporation or someone else's career. With podcasts, we all become our own radio station owners and managers and talent. I mean, the whole thing, we can do everything. And I get a lot of fulfillment out of that because doing it professionally for so many years, I was in radio, I'm able to see all the different ways that a radio station or even a radio show itself works. I've been able to see all the inner mechanisms of them. And
yeah,
so it's given me the opportunity to do a lot of things that I always knew I could do, but never had the opportunity to do in the business I'm in because I got pigeonholed as an audio production guy, which is fine because that's what I am. But what if I want to engineer a show? What if I want to promote a show and market a show? What if I want to be the sales rep for the
yeah,
show? Yeah, I get to do all of that stuff with podcasting. And And to me, that's really very fulfilling. And firmly believe that the new history of radio is with these crazy podcasts.